Once upon a time, a few months back, we all gave our picks for an underrated superhero movie. Today, we're flipping it around. So welcome to Council of Geeks. My name is Nathaniel Wayne, and I am joined tonight by... for God's sake. I am joined by these two schmucks, by Paul Scavito and Ryan Daly. And we have all got a pick for what we consider to be an overrated superhero film. Paul, why don't you kick us off this time?
My pick for the most overrated Marvel film. Was it Marvel or just a superhero film?
It's superheroes. We're opening up.
Are you changing it?
No. All right. My pick for most overrated superhero film is Age of Ultron. Now, this, let me be very clear. I enjoyed this movie.
I suppose this word, I'll just interject real quick. There is a difference between saying something is overrated and saying something is bad.
Correct. There's really only one other film you can compare this movie to, right? Which is the original Avengers film. Is it unfair? Perhaps. The Avengers film did something that no other film in history had done and delivered on it brilliantly, I thought. So why I didn't think this one worked was that I felt it was bloated in terms of the characters, and I thought that was one of the issues that the original Avengers film had, but somehow through the brilliance of Joss Whedon, he was actually able to balance all this out. In this one, whose movie is this? And I understand it's an ensemble film, right? Mm-hmm. But at the center of this film, right, is Tony Stark. In this movie, I feel like should probably be a discussion about reaching too far, which is where Ultron comes from. Mm-hmm. It's through Tony's arrogance that he makes this decision, he builds Ultron, and he doesn't listen to the very good advice that he was given not to do this, right? And that by the end of the film, he is face to face with this thing that he has created and needs to destroy it, and hopefully has learned a lesson. I would argue that we don't get that. Because the answer to defeating Ultron at the end of this film is Tony brings out the other self-thinking android with an Infinity Stone, right? And that's what ends up saving the day. I also think the Vision was wildly underused and a huge disappointment. But so if this is Tony's story, I don't get what the lesson is for him or how he is a better person for having gone through these trials and what he's learned from it. So that's my sort of big issue with this. I wanted it to be more personal. I wanted his hatred of Tony to be more pointedly attacked at him. I think there were too many characters I introduced into this film. I don't think they had enough time to deal with any of these sort of real character arcs. I thought they dropped the ball with Tony. I think Black Widow remains a character that has been basically given nothing to do. The farm with Hawkeye, I thought the movie's pacing completely fell apart. All right, so tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, no, let me ask you a question first. Whose story was the first Avengers? If Age of Ultron is Tony's story, then yes, those problems that you mentioned are legitimate. But I think you're viewing it through a lens that it's not intended to be viewed through. Yep. And so that's why I'm asking whose story was the first Avengers?
So I would say, and I just needed a second to think about the first film, I would say that by and large the first film is really Thor's story.
He doesn't even show up for 40 minutes.
Yeah,
I think Tony emerges from the first one the most changed and the most sort of... Yep. It seems like Tony is the one who has the catharsis, more or less, at the end of it. Even though it really feels like... I would argue the first half of it feels like Nick Fury's movie and S.H.I.E.L.D.'s movie. Mm-hmm. The beginning of Age of Ultron feels very much like Tony is driving this. And then at that moment where he is confronted with, I've made this horrible mistake, we don't see him atoning for it in any way that seems like this is consequences following actions. It's kind of a weird thing. And I feel like at that point, the story is taken away from him and given to both Captain America and the Vision. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I also hate you for bringing these things.
If you watched our other podcasts, previously on Council of Geeks, the reason I am so excited for Civil War, right, is that this movie is going to be about Tony and Steve's relationship, right? And Steve's relationship with Bucky, right? And what they are doing, the things that they believe in, and the stuff they stand for, and it's going to be put in this kind of crucible, right? And we're going to see these really important character pieces coming out of this. I would argue that we don't see a whole lot of that in Ultron. I almost feel like you could have replaced a lot of the heroes with other ones and it wouldn't have mattered.
Age of Ultron is a slightly odd movie for me, because if I look at any individual part of it, almost every part of it I like or love, and in some cases more so than the first movie. But something about the way it is assembled and put together does not work as well, which I think speaks to your issue of, well, this feels like Tony's story. Because that first Avengers movie, I don't think you can definitively say it's any one character's story, but what the first movie did was it was assembled in such a way that the focus could shift and flow from Nick Fury to Tony, to Cap, to Thor, and it just felt like a natural progression. Something about the way Ultron was put together left you with an impression, well, this feels like Tony's story, and then when it moved away from that, you didn't go with it the way that you went with it the first time.
The first Avengers was just a great story, like built structurally, it's perfect, and it did have that emotional wow factor that going into that history. Avengers Age of Ultron didn't have those things. The story, the structure was not out of there. It felt like something that was all over the place and maybe needed an extra 45 minutes to make sense of all of these different things, or else cut a whole lot of them and make it a leaner movie. But it also, as a fan, gave me those things that I did want. I did want Ultron. I did want the twins. I did want Vision. And I did want to see Captain America actually become the leader of the Avengers.
Sure.
The first Avengers is a much better movie, but the second Avengers gave me more of those things that I liked as a fan.
That's Age of Ultron.
Yep.
Ryan, what have you got?
Days of Future Past. X-Men Days of Future Past, for me, was a big disappointment. Some of my problems with X-Men Days of Future Past are admittedly preconceived notions and expectations, but one of those things, like when they went to Comic-Con and they brought out 16 actors on the stage, I was like, I'm going to see a giant team of like 16 X-Men characters. This is going to be great. And I've always wanted to see these guys. And then I watched them and I was like, well, they died. She died again. It's what they're not characters. They're power sets that are just used, and all it was the same people again. I like Xavier, I like Magneto, I like Wolverine, I like Mystique, but I've been with them for 7 movies now. X-Men has 100 different characters you can choose from, but that's not an objective. That's not a problem with the movie itself. That was a problem with me and what I want. My problem with the movie itself is that, okay, yes, it chose to focus on Xavier, Magneto, Mystique, and Wolverine. And I thought it ruined Xavier, Magneto, and Mystique. Because none of the things they did made sense or were good. Starting with Xavier, okay, we end the last movie with him paralyzed. Now, he can walk, but the side effect of him him learning to walk is he can't use his powers, and he's grown a beard and looks like a dirty hippie, and he acts like a heroin junkie. Well, that logic doesn't even track. Why is it?
Right.
Okay,
and
so
how
I hate
is he
this.
going to grow into be the man who runs Xavier?
He already was. So why are you backsliding the character to bring him back to the hero that we needed him to be? So okay, then you've got Magneto. It's like, so we convince Magneto that he needs to work for the greater good to stop this Sentinel program by stopping this assassination, and he saves Mystique. He stops her from doing that mistake, so that he can make the same mistake, knowing what these consequences are. Okay, he's going to do that because he's the bad guy. And it didn't feel like a natural logic of what the character was facing in the scenes.
Well, it was the same thing that happened at the end of the previous film, on the beach.
Yeah, he turns bad because he's bad. The thing that everybody loves, the scene with Quicksilver.
Sure.
And I've had this conversation with people between the Quicksilver of X-Men Days of Future Past and the Quicksilver of Age of Ultron. Give me the one from Age of Ultron. They're like, why? That was nowhere near as good. It's like, well, yeah, the scene in Age of Days of Future Past was an amazing scene. That was a beautiful scene.
Right.
That's all it was. Yep. He wasn't a character. I didn't like that movie, and a lot of people, it was among their best comic book or action movies of the year. And I was like, why? It didn't give me all the characters that I want to see, and the ones that it did focus on, I didn't think made sense.
I've already flayed this movie before.
Well, I was going to say...
You're on my side.
Yeah. It's going to fall to me to defend this film, because Paul's in your corner.
Yep.
Okay. I'm not going to address so many characters who are only power sets things, because you yourself admitted that part of the issue there was your expectation. Right. I really liked that they brought Charles down a few pegs. And here's why. Because if they didn't, that means that he has been an angelic paragon of virtue and has never ever changed or grown or had an arc or had to build up from anything. He's just always known what's best. He's always done what's best. He's just always been that good. Bull! I like that they brought him down and that they gave him something to recover from. And there was also a big logistical thing. They had to have a reason that his power didn't work. Otherwise, the movie is 20 minutes long. In regards to Magneto, I think his actions make perfect sense because it's all rooted in arrogance. Because he is arrogant enough to be told, these are the consequences of what's going on. You have to help us change that. And he is arrogant enough to go, okay, it went wrong because you people did it. I can do it and make it work.
See, you sold it to me better just now than the movie sold it to me.
I also absolutely love the way it ended. I loved the concluding note on it. It just felt like a wonderful closure to the old version of X-Men.
The thing about Xavier and needing him to fall a little bit. I have no problem with him suffering and having setbacks, because you do want to see a little bit of change in the character. I think they went a little bit overboard looking at the source material. Xavier wasn't the focus. He was always the support. He was the mentor. Mm-hmm. But it was never his story, and that's the thing that the movies have chosen to do.
And I think I went on about 20 minutes about why I hated the ending. So
my pick for an overrated comic book movie is Captain America: The First Avenger, which, unless something has changed, I believe is still Paul's favorite comic book movie of all time. Is it still in that number one spot?
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm not doing this to troll you. This is not payback for Moonraker. It's just a happy coincidence. I see it show up on so many people's lists. Not just you. So many people put it in this high ranking. Oh, that was so great. And I look at that and go, why? Because here's the thing. That movie, so far as I'm concerned, had one job to do. And that was to sell me on Steve Rogers and Captain America as a character. And on that one job, it absolutely succeeds. I came away immediately going, I want to see more of that character. I also came away going, I don't ever need to see that movie again. All the other elements going on around him are middling to passable. Let's start with some of the supporting cast. Tommy Lee Jones was a great get and a terrific presence, and he was asleep in this movie. Dominic Cooper as Howard Stark is a caricature of a character. Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter, within the confines of this movie, is stereotypical woman, strong woman ahead of her time, and that's about it. There is stuff done with her later on that does the character much better. Bucky is fine. He fills the best friend role. I feel like the connection between him and Steve was done much better in Winter Soldier flashbacks. The Howling Commandos, the only one I remember at all is Dum Dum Dugan, and I think that's only because of the name and the mustache. My big problem with this movie, the villains. And people have been clamoring for the Red Skull to come back, and I can't figure out why, but I'll get back to him in a second because I want to start with Hydra. Hydra, to me, in this movie, feels like Cobra from G.I. Joe. The cartoon version. It never at any point in this movie feels like they have the upper hand, or that they're winning, or that they're even that big a threat. We're told at various points that they are. Everything that we see visually is always them being beaten back. There's a montage that is nothing but them being beaten back. And as far as the Red Skull is concerned, he looks phenomenal. And it's a bland, generic mad scientist, mustache twirling performance. There's absolutely nothing exceptional about it. It's fine. Yeah, that's definitely from the guy who directed Jurassic Park 3. Sure.
Okay, I'll hold him, you beat him.
A lot of the reason why I love this film is because not only do I think it is a great character origin piece, but it is one of the best done pieces of historical fiction I've really ever seen, in terms of integrating a completely fictional character into this alternative history. But beyond that, I now believe in the moral center of the Marvel Universe. Like, I get why later Coulson collects his cards.
To get to a few of your points, just talking about like some of the other cast members, for Peggy Carter, I got the connection between them. I got the romance and the attraction between them. Did I think she deserved her own series coming out of that movie? No. But I also I don't consider that a fault of the movie. To your first point about Hydra, I agree with you, and that was a problem I had before the movie came out. When they first said that he's not fighting the Nazis, he's fighting Hydra, I was like, why not? The Nazis are the perfect villain. Maybe that was their decision because they wanted to do something with it down the road, but I don't even know that. I don't know why, and I will actually accept that that is the weakest part of the movie because I think the Hydra soldiers look stupid, and their weaponry looks stupid. If it wasn't a G.I. Joe movie, I would love it. But within the realism of the universe that they had created in this Captain America world, even that, I agree with you. I love the look of Red Skull. I was a little bit let down by his last fight with Captain America when they're fighting in the cockpit of the ship.
I actually don't remember that fight at all. I have distinct memories of him, disappearing with the Tesseract,
right.
the flash of light, but that actual fight, I don't remember a single thing about it.
It wasn't that good, and it was disappointing. But the hero and the spirit, more or less, of that movie carried it on its shoulders. So maybe your assessment is right. It was just a fine movie with an exceptionally great protagonist and a great hero, and I think that does elevate it to make it better than fine.
I won't disagree with you. I actually thought Hydra was at its scariest when he pulled the Hydra agent out of the water, and he's sitting there and he's like, cut off one head and 7 more appear or something, and he bites that poison capsule.
Well, see, that's the version of Hydra that works, and that's the version of Hydra we got in Winter Soldier. They are everywhere and they are spread out, and you won't know who they are,
right.
As opposed to these faceless soldiers with ray guns.
Yeah.
All of us are right and all of us are wrong.
Yeah,
but
pretty much.
I'm the least wrong.
This is your chance to throw out your stuff for the people. Where can they find you?
I'll start this time. I have a number of podcasts. First, the Secret Origins podcast, which covers the Secret Origins comics published by DC in the 1980s. That is available on iTunes and Stitcher. Dead Moth and Spies, a Star Wars podcast, available on iTunes. You can also occasionally hear me on G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast, hosted by Aaron Headmoss, Kyle Benning, and myself.
I'm the lead writer of a comic book from Rising Sun Comics called Armadillo Justice. Comixology, Amazon.
Go to your local drugstore and look for the spinning rack. I'm sure it's there.
Oh, don't do that. And Ryan and I are the co-writers of Red and Green. It'll already be out and amazing.
Stop it.
You'll be probably one of the people waiting in line to get your copy of Red and Green.
And I'm going to get out of here real quick because this is getting uncomfortable. Until next time, this council is adjourned.
Getting punchy.